Hello, hello, everyone. Here is another episode of Conversations with Matthew and Sarah. How are you doing, my love?
I'm doing good, doing very good. Got to work from home today, so
I
that was
know, I'm
exciting.
so excited for you. That is an amazing
It
thing.
was.
It's great to get out of my workspace and then come out and then see you here. So, super grateful for
Parked in the
that.
living room. Got a new desk and a new monitor, so I can look at spreadsheets better.
Yes, yes, that is awesome. Well, today we are going to be discussing the topic of moving on. And I don't want to limit it to just moving on from one relationship to another. I think that it's worth talking about the concept in greater depth in terms of when am I really ready for a healthy relationship? Have I really moved on from a past trauma? How do I know that? Um, where where do I go for resources, or what has my own experience been? Moving on is a big topic. The past can be daunting, and it can rear its ugly head a lot. I was somebody that used to be plagued by the past. And as I was plagued by the past, I was making poor decisions in the present and was pretty much just making it so that my future wasn't looking all that bright. But God, which are probably the two best words in human existence, but God and His grace on me, on my soul, I'm just so immensely grateful to be in a place where I can say I have confidently moved on from my past and every single aspect of it, to the point where I felt that I was ready. I knew I was ready. I felt that confidence that can come only from the Lord, in my opinion. And I was ready for a healthy relationship. And I'm not trying to say that's something manifested or anything new age like that. I don't believe in that stuff. But I do believe that in order to be ready for the type of healthy relationship that I wanted, I needed to be completely healthy. And so I got to that point. And so, yeah, I'm excited to see where this conversation goes. I'll hand you the baton, babe. Anything you'd like to say to start?
Moving on. That's a tough one. Moving on from jobs, moving on from family, moving on from relationships, moving on from friends, moving on from lost loved ones. I mean, there's a lot of things. Trauma in our childhood. You can go so many different directions with moving on. Uh, Even a Rascal Flatts song.
That's
Moving on.
right.
Yeah.
That's
Been
right.
singing that as you was talking. So I'll spare y'all my singing voice.
Matthew can actually sing really well, guys. I can't sing, but he can sing really well. So, not that he's going to do it here, but I just wanted to have your back on that
Well, thank
because
you.
I enjoy your
I
singing.
appreciate that. But what are we going to talk about? Moving on. I will say through God's grace, years of falling and failing, and a lot of therapy, I was able to move on from childhood traumas and things of the past. But most of what I had to move on from was myself. I kept blaming myself for the mistakes that I made, not and realized that some of the mistakes wasn't mistakes I made, but it was things that was done to me, and there was nothing that I could have done to change the outcome. But still, I find ourselves sometimes we blame ourselves for getting in those situations. I should have knew better. Many times you heard people say that, or I shouldn't have done that. I did that. That's why this happened. But sometimes things just happen, so you have to move on from the guilt and the shame that you feel to yourself.
I agree completely. And let me just say, just straight up, no confusion whatsoever. Childhood trauma is 100% not the child's fault.
Nope.
Now, it is understood, and I just know from my own soul searching journey and the healing that I've had to do, that in psychology, I've read things before that said a child psychologist can observe a kid their first 7 years and see, based on what's happened in their life, what their future decision making patterns are going to be as an adult. And so if they've gone through trauma, if they've gone through abuse of any kind, if that isn't healed, if they don't go through the process, the very tough process, by the way, of healing from that, then there will be repercussions in the adult life of making poor decisions. Now, that doesn't exempt somebody from accountability when they're an adult. Once you're an adult, if you're making poor decisions and it's a result of trauma, I think that, well, for me, let me keep it on me. For me, I got to a point where it was just like, all right, I need to do whatever it takes to heal from whatever it is that's in my subconscious, that's like in my soul, that's like just tucked away that I don't want to face. I need to develop the courage to face it and walk through the pain and make it to the other side, because otherwise I'm going to continue to make poor decisions. I'm going to continue to find myself in toxic, unhealthy situations, and it's just going to be a miserable existence. So once that willingness came along and I went through the healing journey, to your point, my love, you talked about therapy, different types of therapies, whatever, what have you. Once I was able to heal from everything, the resentments and even the stuff that I had done, because it's really easy to look at other people, but then looking at the stuff that I did and accepting God's forgiveness and moving on from that. At that point, I became capable of learning how to love someone, because I finally had learned to love myself.
That's big.
I finally had learned to accept and receive the love of Christ. And I went from like a place, I always tell people, I was raised Catholic, and I had gone back to the Catholic Church temporarily for a few years, a few years ago when I was 35, and I decided to become pretty much a Christian fundamentalist, which I know can have negative connotations for a lot of people. However, it's really, for me, I see it as being a biblical Christian. And I don't like to get into arguments about this topic, because for my Protestant friends, that'll be like, oh, okay. I'm going to say my Protestant acquaintances. We just talked about how we don't have friends. But anyway, but for those that are Protestant, they may say, oh, well, you went from not being saved to being saved. And whatever, that's fine. What I can tell you is that as a Catholic, and not a good one, by the way, very unfaithful and disobedient to God, I know what it's like to cry out to God and God be there for me, even in my disobedience. So at this point in my life, where I would consider myself to be a devout Christian and doing the best that I can to walk in the narrow path and be an ambassador to Christ as best I can be, the difference for me wasn't so much from being unsaved to saved. It was more from being obedient or disobedient to obedient. So I can pinpoint a day and time, December 2020, where I decided to become a Christian fundamentalist, go to a church and become obedient on the narrow path. And so, but none of that could have ever happened if I would have never healed from the trauma. That's just the reality. If I had not moved on from that trauma, I would have still been making bad decisions, even within the church. Even within the church, I would have been one of these people that would have totally overcompensated and said, oh, I'm going to attend every Bible teaching I can. I'm going to read the Bible until I'm blue in the face. I'm going to remember, like, the way that I would have been one of those people that was not healed, that would have tried to overcompensate and kind of put a Band-Aid on top of all of my trauma by just diving into Christianity in a way that for me would have been unhealthy. And I wouldn't have had a real connection with God. I would have known about him, but I wouldn't have really had a relationship with him. And so I'm just so grateful for the Lord really showing his mercy and his grace upon me to the point where I could move on completely from the past and be able to receive what he has given us, the reward that he has given us, which is each other.
Yeah, that's true. There's a lot. moving on, I think you said a few things at the beginning that I wanted to hit on. A lot of times I find it in our lives that moving on is, and I want to say this because it is very hard to do that. It took me a long time to do that too, but a lot of times moving on from things that happen to us is easier than it is moving on from things that we've done to ourselves. The mistakes that we've made, forgiving ourselves, moving on from what we call things that we've committed to ourselves, the sins that we've done, or the people that we've hurt, including ourselves, our children, our parents, our siblings, our whatever, our significant others, things like that. But it's so hard for us to forgive that, and I find that was one of the hardest things that I had to do, was to forgive some of the mistakes I make. Because a lot of times we want to hold ourselves to being perfect, and we can't forgive ourselves, and that to me is I honestly don't believe God can, he forgives us of our sins. Of course, we talked about that, and that's another story. But I think God is like, he says in that verse, how can you expect me to forgive you if you can't forgive your brother? I also think he means us. You can't forgive yourself. You have to forgive yourself, and you have to move on from the things that you've done, and quit living in the past of the regret that you have.
But I agree with you totally. And one thing that I want to make sure that everyone is clear on when it comes to the way that I process, guys, I'm sure that y'all can identify, these are not new concepts. This whole idea of, I think I heard it the first time on Kung Fu Panda, where like the giant turtle was like, oh goodness, what did he say? Like something about the past and the future, and that today is a gift. That's why they call it present. And I'm butchering. What he said was really endearing and very true. He was like the wise man in the story. All these things are not new concepts for me. Even though I was familiar with moving on from your past, and like even when Paul said, stop thinking about it, don't put it behind you, move forward. Obviously, I'm paraphrasing that. I still struggle to actually apply it. And it always had to do with unresolved trauma that wasn't healed. And so whenever I would hear these things and I would decide within my own will that I was going to, fine, I'm going to forget about the past and that's it. And I'm going to do it right now. And I would get on this white knuckling path that made me miserable because I ultimately never was really able to do it. And so by the time I started getting on the healing journey, I became very honest with myself about forgiveness, about really giving myself the time needed to process and to heal, no matter how long it took and no matter how embarrassing it was. Let me tell you guys, back in the day, when I was married previously, I've been divorced for over 10 years. And I can remember during this time that I wanted to get it together and I couldn't figure it out. And by the time I started the healing journey, I really embarrassed myself a lot of times. Back then I was on Facebook. I was posting dissertations on Facebook, looking crazy, just kind of processing whatever insanity I was going through. Then somebody suggested that I open a blog. I opened a blog, which has for a few years not existed because it had a lot of insane thoughts. They were good thoughts, but there were also a lot of crazy thoughts. And so I embarrassed myself in front of the world. And you know what? That was the process I had to go through. I pray that not everyone has to do something like that, but sometimes I just had to go through that. I had to learn in that difficult way in order to make it to this other side. And there's fear. There's fear in like, oh, I don't want to walk. Or you might even be able to test this with somebody that like if you touch on a sensitive topic, how do they get? Do they recoil? Do they embrace it? Do they, some people cannot even go there with certain subjects because it gets them upset exactly. And that I had to push through all of that because on the other side of all of that discomfort and quite frankly, torture was freedom. was freedom. And I also kept it real, because back when I was writing this blog and I was discussing things with people, and people would be like, oh, you should embrace positive thinking and blah, blah. It's not that I don't have the ability to think positively. But my soul, I had not allowed Jesus to go into my soul and clean house in a deep way. I had not allowed him to really go in there and make it his home, renew my mind, transform, give me a heart of flesh instead of a heart of stone. I hadn't done that. And by the time I became so honest that it might have been annoying to people, I just kept it all the way 100, as we say in my neighborhood. I kept it all the way 100, and I would be like, you know what? I know about your positive thinking. I know about how we have to forgive. I know what the Bible says, but I'm not in a place where I can execute that. I'm on the journey of getting there. God help me, but I'm not there right now. And I don't have to make believe that I am, period. I don't need anybody to think that I'm a good Christian. That doesn't matter to me in the slightest. If I need to be humiliated and broken down for the sake of Christ, well, then so be it. At the end of the day, I don't matter. All that matters is Christ. But I want to say that because I know that there are people out there that are really trying, probably in their own will, that are really trying to make a change, and they find it so hard. And I got to tell y'all that for me, it started with being painfully painfully honest with where I was. I had to be painfully honest, because you know what? I don't have the strength to walk on the path of failure to make it on the other side, but I didn't do it alone. It was Christ. Christ was with me. I had to trust Christ. And of course, God is faithful, but it hurt. And when I couldn't do it, I couldn't do it. And I've told you this before, Matthew, like in my forgiveness process, there are some people that are like, oh yeah, I forgive you. They could do it in like 2 steps. It might take me 2,000 steps. And let me tell you, that 2,000 step process, I'm going to feel each and every one of those steps. I'm going to go through whatever emotional roller coaster in each step that I got to go through. Because by the time I get to the end of that road and I say, I forgive you, not only have I forgiven, but I've forgotten as well. And it doesn't mean that I got amnesia. It means that I'm no longer hurt. I'm no longer triggered. I no longer feel like there's a thorn in my side every time we talk about that traumatic event. That's why I'm able to talk about the things that I talk about, whether it's whatever happened in my childhood, whatever happened in my adolescence, whatever happened in my adult years. I can talk about it because I've healed from it. But that healing process, I had to keep it real. And sometimes it involved being embarrassed. Sometimes it involved looking stupid. Sometimes it involved, going through the journey for a longer period than other people probably maybe thought. Maybe I didn't look like a good Christian, whatever. It's all good to me because at the end of the day, I found freedom.
That's true. There was a couple things I can't remember now.
Sorry, babe, I talk a lot. I am what'd you call me in the first episode? The Gigabox?
Yeah.
That is me.
But I was going to say, moving on, I can't remember now.
It's okay, baby.
Well, it was good.
It'll come back to you.
I was going to say, moving on is especially from us, it's like a bomb. We've all watched those movies of where people have to defuse bombs and stuff. If you hide it in the yard, the bomb's got a detonator, and it's going to go off in a certain amount of time. If you put it in the closet, it's still going to go off. If you go dig up a hole in the yard and put it in the yard, it's still going to explode sometime sooner or later. That bomb's going to explode. The only way you can keep it from exploding is if you get it out and you take the time to cut the right wires. You might cut a wrong wire and it might explode, but until you take that time and fix it, which is cut the wires to detonate it, to keep it from exploding big time, because that bomb's going to explode. Sooner or later, it's going to explode.
Oh, yeah.
You can't just put it on a shelf and hope it doesn't. It's going to explode.
It might as well be a controlled explosion if you can help it.
Yeah, so you might as well, have the hazmat suit on and everything else. So that was what I was going to say is when you're moving on, you have to look at this stuff. It's going to hurt. It's going to be painful. But what's worse is living with that constant bomb ticking sound, and it's going to go off at any time.
100%. And to just keep it all the way a buck, some of us are crazy out here. You get what I'm saying? One day we'll talk about all the stuff, because a lot of my journey has to do with psychiatric illness as well. I'm very stable now, only by the grace of God. But boy, I got a history. So some of us are crazy out here. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, if I'm not healed and there's a ticking bomb, it's gonna explode, and it's gonna be in the ugliest way. It's just gonna be so unbecoming. It's gonna be whatever it is, and bombs have exploded. So I'm just so grateful that that is the past, and that I moved on, and that I was really ready for this moment in my life where I could have a healthy relationship and be able to reciprocate, that I am healthy. I'm able to reciprocate and be the woman that Matthew deserves for me to be. Because even if you and I would have met, I don't know, 7 years ago, it's like, as much as I would have loved the idea of a healthy relationship and all that, I wouldn't have been capable of loving you, because I hadn't moved on from all of my baggage.
That you had bombs still going off.
Yeah, exactly. And then I was gonna come and project to you and all this stuff, and it's just like, no.
Combined our bombs, and they would have all went off.
Exactly.
But I think we're winding down here. But a couple questions, just if people want to comment or feel like commenting on this. I don't know how long this video will stay out there. I guess forever in podcast land.
I guess
not Facebook
not.
land, but podcast land.
Exactly, podcast.
But questions is, how have you moved on? What have you done to move on? How long did it take, and was it painful? And if people feel like talking about anything, you can in the comments. We'd love to read about them, and because we're still growing, we're still learning. We're not perfect. We're still learning of how to deal with things and how to move on, and as healthy humans, adult humans, for the first time in our lives. You got anything to add?
Yeah, like if without Christ, your girl is going to end up in a psychiatric ward. Trust and believe. Make no doubt about it. I know it sounds funny, and it is funny, but for those of y'all that know, you know, and it's real talk. So I need to be vigilant in every regard in my life. I need to make sure that I'm as healthy as possible, not just for my home, but more than anything to honor God himself, because it's in my life, there has been no power greater than that of Jesus Christ that has saved me, taken me out of the gutter, taken me out of despair. So even though I was talking to my mom earlier today, and she was like, well, the crazy insanity you used to go through, it's like it's 100% eradicated. And I was like, Mom, I wouldn't say that. I would say I have to remain vigilant. But let's just, without Christ, your girl's going to go nuts. So, yeah. All that said, on that lovely note, I guess we could go ahead and end it. And thanks, guys. Really appreciate y'all.
Good night.